Welcome to NobelBiz webinars.
And I think, Rachel, let's kind of pivot to some things that I think you're going to be able to really talk about is um, the different strategies, right, that we have to deploy for the contact center, right? Some of these have different requirements. And so if you can kind of chime in and kind of add to what Jen was saying, it'd be great to be able to get that full context.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple buckets here. The first is looking at what's your approach going to be? Is it going to be 100% remote? Is it going to be hybrid? Is it going to be on site? Because you have to have that information to start out with. It tells you how wide a geographic net that you can cast, for example. Um, is it a remote scenario, but they have to work on Pacific time? Because that could be a scenario too where someone in Georgia would be completely fine working on Pacific time. But over time, as the world opens up, are you going to be able to retain that person? So, what we look at first is the kind of logistical aspects of it. And then from there, we actually build out a very specific strategy. So, if we have more flexibility on geography, that means all of a sudden, again, the world opens up to us. But that can be a unique beast in and of itself, because the based off of the skill set they're looking for, the hours they're looking for, even the pay rate that they're looking for, we may have to look at specific geographies that are going to sustain those sorts of things. We might have to consider competition. On the one hand, for example, Phoenix, we were just hiring in Phoenix, and Phoenix is highly competitive from a call center perspective. So even though we were paying more because it was a contract position, we weren't getting the same amount of volume as we had anticipated. And so we had to pivot over to Salt Lake City, which had similar volume. So you have to really look at what the market's going to sustain. You have to look at the pay rates. You have to look at the geographies that would sustain those pay rates, but also understand the market competition and kind of the competitive landscape that you're walking into too. Because it can be easy to have a conversation or in a room around like, oh, great, we can go to these 5 different geographies and then we can either pay more competitively or get better talent or whatever that might look like. But you're going to have to come up with a strategy for each geo based off of what the market competition and even just the market behaviors look like, especially within the pandemic. If you're looking at a state that's entirely open versus a state that's not open right now, that's going to change the behavior of people who might be interested in going into work versus still wanting to work 100% remote. So being able to drive standardization and consistency is really key. So we do recommend that in terms of, it can be challenging to build a community when that community is a combination of on-site and remote. For example, the on-site community is naturally going to build their own dynamic, being kind of elbow to elbow with each other, and the remote community will build a different one. So that can be challenging from a leadership perspective to be able to manage. So as we already have seen within call center, the more you can drive consistency, the better. The more there is less of well, that group has these perks versus we don't have these perks. That can also lead to friction or churn as well. So the more you can build that standardization and then manage to it, that's what's going to help build a successful culture over time that is more consistent.